Have you ever gone to church and heard a sermon that felt like the pastor was thinking just of you when he or she wrote it? I know I have. Of course, I've also had the exact opposite happen. When I've gone to church and sat there listening to what sounded like, well, it sounded like I was eavesdropping on a message that was meant for somebody else and had absolutely nothing to do with me. I expect you've all been there today, too. Not today. I said that wrong. Well, but maybe you will have that experience today. Actually, I guarantee that you will have that experience today, both of them. Because I have a couple different sermons that I'm going to give this morning. And so for part of it, you may feel that you are the person that I am speaking to directly. And for the other part of it, you may feel like it's just got absolutely nothing to do with you. And that's okay, just tune out. But there's a third sermon coming at the end. So as you listen to the first two messages, hold on, pay attention, get angry if you have to, but hold on. Because I promise you, by the time we reach the end, it'll be okay. Deal? Thank you. Sermon number 1. For those of you who are pleased with the results of the presidential election, congratulations. In a victory that none of the pollsters predicted, Donald Trump won the 290 electoral votes, compared with Hillary Clinton's 228. Indisputably making him the next president of the United States. As he prepares to take office, we will ask God to bless him, to give him wisdom, to help him embody the promise that he made in his victory speech on Tuesday night when he said, "I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be a president for all Americans." President-elect Trump ran a campaign to call attention to the difficulties faced by working-class Americans, whose way of life has become more difficult as manufacturing jobs have either become obsolete due to changes in technology or have been shipped overseas by corporations that value profits over people. He also pointed out the need to rebuild America's crumbling infrastructure as part of his vision to make America great again. These are things that we can all get behind. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? In his campaigning, Trump managed to build a coalition of people who liked his economic ideas and people who represent some of the most virulent strains of racism, sexism, homophobia, and xenophobia in our nation. And that's the reason that no former U.S. president of either party would endorse him. That's why many conservative news outlets that had always endorsed the Republican presidential candidate denounced Trump, calling him a danger to our democracy, and encouraging voters to vote for anybody else. Of course, we all know that not everyone who voted for Donald Trump is racist or sexist or anti-gay or anti-Muslim or anti-immigrant. In fact, I am certain that those of you who are sitting here today aren't any of those things. After all, if you were, why would you be part of a church that's open and affirming, that proudly declares that we follow the call of Jesus to love God and our neighbor by cherishing and honoring people, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, socioeconomic status, marital status or history, physical or mental ability, gender identity or expression, or sexual orientation? And just in case you missed it, that was a quote from our open affirming statement. I know that you're all good people. But please realize that there are people who are legitimately fearful of what Trump's presidency means for themselves and their loved ones. Not only because several of the official planks in the Republican platform have set up some real fear, but also because of the actions of the members of the other segment of Trump's coalition, those who feel emboldened by his victory. You may not know it, but in just the first 3 days after the election, the Southern Poverty Law Center has documented more than 200 separate instances of harassment and intimidation aimed at Muslims, Latinos, African Americans, immigrants, LGBTQ people, and women. These incidences range from Muslim women having their hijabs torn off of their heads, to racist graffiti spray painted on vehicles, to Nazi symbols being painted on schools. In East Haddam, a sign reading, "Dear Muslims, immigrants, women, disabled, LGBTQ, and all people of color, we love you boldly and proudly. We will endure," was vandalized by someone who painted "Trump 2016 over the words of unity. At my hospital in Yonkers, I've had numerous conversations in the past week with fearful staff members telling similar stories and worrying about their safety and about their loved ones. Just yesterday evening, while I was walking in Norwalk, I heard a group of young men in a bar who were chanting vile, sexist epithets about Hillary Clinton and her supporters. Let me be very clear. I know that every one of you sitting in this room is sickened by these things, just as I am. I know that. But there's something special that especially those of you who voted for Donald Trump can do. Speak out, loudly and clearly. Tell President-elect Trump, I supported you in the election because of X, whatever your reason was. But I'm categorically opposed to the divisiveness, hateful rhetoric, and acts of violence and intimidation that accompanied the campaign, that have characterized the days since the election. Write a letter to the editor. Speak out publicly in whatever venue you have. Just this past Friday, the North Carolina Republican Party chair, Robin Hayes, did just that, in response to plans by the Ku Klux Klan to hold a Trump victory parade there. Hayes said, "We are disgusted and condemn this extremist ideology and associated actions in the strongest possible terms. These acts and thought processes are no reflection of the heartbeat of this great country and are counter to the efforts to make America great again. We stand with the Democratic Party in calling these out-of-state troublemakers to go home." As Republicans, you have a special voice on this issue. Please, use it. That brings me to sermon number 2. For those of you who are displeased with the results of the presidential election, losing is hard, especially when it blindsides you. In the last few days, the shock and the fear have been palpable. There's been a lot of soul-searching going on, as well as people trying to assign blame to third-party voters, to the Democratic Party, to FBI Director James Comey, and to a host of others. Some folks have taken to the streets protesting the results of the election, and while the Bill of Rights does indeed guarantee freedom of speech as the first guaranteed freedom, Donald Trump did, in fact, win, fair and square. Even if Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote by more than 500,000 votes. That's how the Electoral College system works. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. So there are those out there protesting. And for us, it's important to point that out as freedom of speech insofar as that's what it is, but when it crosses the line into violence and destruction of property, you have a right, a responsibility to speak out. It is, however, legitimate to disagree with the incoming president, to oppose policies that may be harmful or unjust. With one party controlling the White House, both houses of Congress, and soon the Supreme Court, things will certainly be challenging. But that doesn't mean there's nothing that you can do. The other night, President-elect Trump said, "For those who have chosen not to support me in the past, of which there were a few people," he said, chuckling, "I'm reaching out to you for your guidance and your help so that we can work together to unify our great country." Give that guidance. Let the new president know what's important. Tell our congressional delegation what you feel they need to stand for. Remind them to try and find common ground where possible, working to care for our veterans, to repair the nation's infrastructure, but not to give in on matters of justice. Remember, too, that there are midterm elections in 2 years, and there are constructive things you can do. This past Tuesday, nearly 45% of eligible voters stayed home. So get out there. Take part in voter registration drives and then volunteer for your favorite campaign and get out the vote effort. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? Don't make the mistake of thinking that the government is the only organization that can solve problems. Support Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, the Human Rights Commission, Amnesty International, Earth Justice, Emily's List, the NAACP, MoveOn.org, or any group that does work that you feel transforms the world for the better. And that brings me to sermon number 3. For all of us. There is one particular institution that I'd suggest that you support. It is Stewardship Sunday, after all, right? Though we have just come through what is likely the nastiest election season in living memory, each week we have gathered here at the corner of King Street and South King as God's own people, Republicans and Democrats together, with a smattering of Greens, Libertarians, Socialists, Independents, and a couple people who just can't make up their minds. We are young, middle-aged, and some of us have stopped counting birthdays. We are gay, lesbian, straight, bi, trans, cis, and a few of us are just confused about what all those terms even mean. And that's okay, too. We are cradle UCCers, and we are refugees from other denominations. But what we hold in common is a belief that God calls us into a diverse community, that we are better when we share God's work together, that God is still speaking, that God is calling us to keep looking for the next task that calls for our faithful response. And all of that makes this church something really special. More than 3 years ago, when I was just doing occasional supply preaching at whatever church needed somebody to fill in, I spent a few weeks here. Some of you probably remember that. I commented at that time to somebody that if I were ever crazy enough to get back into parish work, it would have to be a church like King Street. I didn't think it would happen. In fact, I was certain that it would happen. Carlo Moreno can tell you just how certain I was that it wouldn't happen, as I told him about 50,000 times to leave me alone. But now that I've been settled pastor here, for almost a year and a half, I still feel the same way about this church. Wow. Week in and week out, we come together to celebrate Christian community, working together for that vision that Isaiah shared in this morning's reading, of that day where every infant lives to old age, where everyone will be able to build their own homes and their own futures and not have them taken away from them. We work and dream and live toward that day, when our nation and our world can live out peace and respect, like what we model here. Carolyn Ruffles likes to say, God loves this church. I love this church too. That's why I was crazy enough to tack a part-time pastorate onto the full-time chaplaincy work that I also love. That's why I'm a pledging member of this church, and why I'm increasing my pledge this year, so that this congregation can have an even greater impact, not only on our lives, but on the lives of our community, on the lives of all of the people in our nation and around the globe. And I know that you love this church too. I see it every time I'm here. I see it every time I get a phone call or an email or a text message or something pops up on Facebook. I can see your love for this church. And so today, I invite you to pledge your commitment for this coming year. Not just because we've got an electric bill to pay and insurance, not just because we have to pay Paul Maliska's salary. Paul doesn't make much. But I know that you want to support this church because of what we do. Because of who we are, because of the welcome that you and your family have found here. Because of the chance that you get every time you come through these doors to look in the face of somebody who is just like you, and then to look in someone else's face and think, wow, we are so different, but we're so together. That doesn't happen very often. This church is a beacon of hope for Danbury, for Connecticut, for our whole world, really. And so I know that you will offer your support. If you've already filled out your pledge card, it's not too late to get another one so you can write in a bigger number. If this sermon has twisted your tail to the point that you just want to get a new pledge card and write in the 0, I guess you could do that. But I don't know why you would. Truth-telling is important, especially when it's uncomfortable. My hope is that each one of you has heard a truth today that you needed to hear. My guess is that you've also heard a truth that you kind of wished you hadn't heard, or maybe one that just went right past you. It could be. But we tell the truth here. We do it in love. We do it every week. We hold hands, we hug, we sing, we kiss, we read Scripture, we do the things that need doing. And in that there is much blessing. In just a few moments, we will collect our pledge cards. You'll have a chance to bring your card forward and to place it in the offering plate that's on the communion table. And that's no accident. For we pledge our gifts to God, and we receive God's gifts in turn. When the offering is collected and is brought forward, those communion elements will come forward. Our gifts to God and God's gifts to us, happening at the same time in the same place. May we then open our hearts, giving of our time and our talents. May we open our wallets, giving of our treasure. May we open our lives to fully experience the presence of Christ in this sacred community. Amen.